Well, I think for some of us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And in 1986, I got the call. I was in a triathlon in Palm Springs, California. I was on the biking portion of the race. I was making a turn, and there was a police officer on the corner. He was pointing at me and telling me to make this turn. And there were two cyclists on the corner, and I swung around the cyclists and passed them. The problem was the police officer had his back to the oncoming traffic. So when I passed the cyclist and I made the turn, this four-wheel drive vehicle going about 55 miles an hour catapulted me out of my bike, and I wound up breaking 6 vertebrae in my spine. And the compression from the force of hitting the ground compressed the vertebrae. They're called compression fractures. And when you compress volume like that of material, it's got to go somewhere. So it went back on my spinal cord. And because of the way that I landed and that I flexed forward very hard, the top vertebrae, T8, thoracic number 8, compressed more than 60%, and the arch that the spinal cord passes through broke like a pretzel. So I had multiple compression fractures. I had bone fragments on the cord, and I had the neural arch of T8 broken. So the typical protocol for that is what's called Harrington rod surgery, where they do a full laminectomy. They cut off all the back parts of your vertebrae. In my case, base of my neck to the base of my spine, screw in these stainless steel rods. The action of screwing the rods into the vertebrae could cantilever the spine off the cord and make some room. But if it doesn't work, you still have the same condition. And so they told me if I didn't have the surgery, I'd probably never walk again. And so I had 4 opinions from 4 of the leading surgeons in Southern California. Scripps Hospital, 2 were from Scripps, and 2 were from JFK in Palm Springs.
Yeah, that's my hometown, Scripps, yeah.
So I decided against the surgery, and I just thought, hell, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm laying face down. And there's an intelligence that lives within each and every one of us that's giving us life. And that intelligence is consciousness. And consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention. So I reasoned maybe it was paying attention to me. So I thought, I better start paying attention to it. So I said, let me see if I could connect with it. If I could connect with it and give it a plan, a template, a design. And when I was happy with that design and I was completely present, I would surrender my creation to this greater mind, because I certainly couldn't do the healing, but it knew how to heal. Anyway, 6.5 weeks of absolute hell. I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. I'd start reconstructing my vertebrae in my mind, and then the next thing I know, I'd start thinking about, am I going to live in a wheelchair? Should I sell my home? Should I sell my practice? And I became aware that I kept focusing on what I didn't want to have happen instead of what I do want to have happen. So I realized that when you're under stress or some type of trauma, that the hormones of stress cause us to always focus on the worst case scenario. That's what survival is about. So after 6.5 weeks, I started getting on top of it. And it took me about 3 hours every day in those first 6.5 weeks to go through it, and I was never satisfied. But about 6.5 weeks, I felt like I hit a tennis ball right in the sweet spot. I went through the whole thing. I never lost my focus, because if I lost my focus, I would have to start all over again because it wasn't clear. Yeah, when I went through that process, Brian, and I made it through, something clicked, and all of a sudden, it got easier. And my body started to respond to my mind. I mean, quickly. Pain levels dropped. My neurological condition changed. I felt like I had more energy. What took me 3 or 4 hours to do, I was doing in 45 minutes, and all of a sudden, my body started healing. And so I was back on my feet in 10.5 weeks. I was back in my life at 12 weeks. I was training again at 12 weeks. And
what did doctors say about this?
Well, the doctors were absolutely clear that I would never walk again, and they were absolutely clear that I had a head injury, that I was not fit to make those decisions. In 1986, you just didn't do that back then.
And what caused you to even think of this? I mean, what was Joe like back then? I mean, were you open-minded to different ideas?
I think I was somewhat open-minded. I was more of a philosopher. I love the principles, but this is an initiation.
This is putting it all on the line.
And I figured, look, if I'm going to be in a wheelchair, possibly, at least I gave it my best shot, you know. And so they told me that if I didn't have the surgery, they'd have to put me in a body cast for 6 months to a year. So when I went back to see one of the doctors who was the medical director at Scripps Hospital in San Diego, he was blown away and was so happy for me. He was the one that was giving me the hardest time, and he just couldn't believe it. So during that time, I just made a deal with myself that if I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter, and I've been doing that since 1986.